This video was made possible thanks to the support of my YouTube members and my patrons. Pledge today and you can get early video access, your name in the credits, and more. Links in the description. As we go past the halfway point of this transformative new era of Doctor Who, it's become increasingly clear that the show is going to great lengths to show its range to a prospective new audience in ways that are pretty easy to communicate. Here's the musical episode, this is a bottle episode set on a landmine, obligatory art piece episode, Doctor Who Meets Bridgerton is an upcoming one, and another piece of modern pop culture cachet that Russell T Davies wants to invoke is Black Mirror. Black Mirror arguably walked in the slipstream of Doctor Who's revival, though obviously targeted at an older audience from a different network, but being able to centre technology in standalone short films in an anthology format in the vein of The Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt was a brilliant concept from Charlie Brooker, an admitted Doctor Who fan. Well, nobody's perfect. Enter Dot and Bubble, the latest in a long tradition of Doctor Light stories to help with the demanding filming schedule required, as well as making up the second episode of the first filming block with 73 yards, as Ncuti Gatwa was filming the final season of Sex Education. In fact, his first day of on-set filming for the show after the giggle was for Dot and Bubble's climactic scene. But before we can get to that, let me back up. The idea for Dot and Bubble is actually something that's been simmering in the back of Russell T Davies' head for a few years now. In fact, when he left the show to Stephen Moffat in 2010, Russell apparently pitched the idea of a visible Twitter for Series 6 with the initial concept starring the 11th Doctor and Amy Pond. However, technological limitations meant the concept didn't get very far. But now, 13 years later,
we have the technology.
These fun concept sketches from Russell are finally achievable on television, especially with Disney's financial backing and the skills of director Dylan Holmes Williams and director of photography Sam Kerr. Now before we dive into Dot and Bubble, these videos are made possible thanks to the support of my patrons, and patrons are able to support these videos, so I'd like to thank DC63, a Doctor Who fan film channel who have just started their 6th season and a new era for their series as a Doctor with a new face falls from the sky and stops an alien invasion with new friends. It's a tale as old as time, and DC63 have also released a behind-the-scenes confidential episode on the making of the opener. Check out their channel, link in the description, new episodes every couple of months. Thanks so much to DC63 for supporting the channel. Now back to the review. Dot and Bubble takes place in the city of Fine Time, a sanitized pastel-coloured party utopia for rich teenagers. Isolated in a huge glass dome, they also live their lives through literal social media bubbles projected in front of them, which also instructs them on basic bodily functions. We follow Lindy Pepperbean, played by Callie Cook, as her bubble is frequently being burst by the 15th Doctor and Ruby Sunday, who are investigating the disappearances of Fine Time citizens at the hands of giant slugs. Where did these man-trap creatures come from? What is their goal? And can Lindy escape Fine Time before she's next on the hit list? I'm not sure if there are enough Doctor Light episodes for them to have an archetypal lead character, but compare Lindy Pepperbean to characters like Elton Pope, Sally Sparrow, or companions like Stephen, Ruby, or Donna, and she's possibly the furthest from. You can have quirky but sympathetic oddballs, or traditionally heroic and capable, but Dot and Bubble's biggest storytelling hurdle is attempting to get the audience to sympathise with a pampered, spoilt rich girl whose entire life is captured by artificial virtue and connections. I can genuinely imagine Dot and Bubble just not working due to its lead character, but oh my gasp, it turns out that Callie Cook is a born star and is able to walk that tightrope of making Lindy obnoxious and vapid and lots of other adjectives, all framed through Lindy's innermost need to make sure that everyone around her knows about her virtues.
I just saw some refurb, so I'm not depleting any of Fine Time's resources. I'm so careful about that.
In Doctor Who magazine, Russell described Lindy as a bit Roald Dahl And that absolutely makes sense. She fits in with these colourful but compromised characters with limited language choices to get across morality tales to children. But when the threat of the episode, the man-traps, start killing off the supporting cast one by one, the way Callie Cook plays these reactions is genuinely affecting. You get Ruby trying to kill her with kindness, putting her best retail staff face on as Lindy patronises and insults her. Ruby bursts Lindy's bubble by getting her to look beyond it to notice her empty office, and Lindy's horrified but quiet reaction to seeing the slug creature really is a sight to behold. I absolutely love this reveal in general. It's so moody and well shot.
That's a challenging wank. Oh, sorry.
So much of her response is internalized shock, and she's terrified out of her mind, but manages to quietly put her bubble back up and, with tears in her eyes, goes back to watching the clip-syncing pop star Ricky September as a mental escape. Obviously, Callie Cook is so terrific here, but credit does have to be given to Dylan Holmes Williams, the director, hot off the presses of his last episode, 73 Yards, and I'm not just talking about his work on the visuals during this set piece. Yes, the episode looks gorgeous. I adore the shots of Lindy peering out of her bubble at work, such a clever use of the camera's depth of field, not to mention Murray Gold's dimming of the music as Lindy's vision extends beyond the sanitized, over-sensory bubble. But one key part of directing is being able to get the best performances out of your actors, and Callie Cook is constantly being filmed at awkward, close and obtrusive angles against no in-person actors, which can't have been easy, but she makes it look so natural. Apparently the team only spent a single 10-hour day doing camera tests to get these angles and acquaint Callie to the bubble setup, but whatever they did, it clearly worked because they somehow made it feel natural on screen. Yeah, Callie Cook is great, but credit needs to be given to Dylan Holmes Williams and director of photography Sam Kerr for giving her the environment and the tools to give such a strong leading performance. Anyway, back to Callie and her performance as Lindy. Obviously, our perspective on this character is going to massively shift come the end of the story, but in these early scenes, I couldn't help but sympathize with her a little bit, like in a feeling sorry for a toddler struggling to tie their shoes kind of way, which feels a bit infantilizing, and a lot of it is played for laughs.
Forward.
I adore the Doctor and Ruby's stunned, slow processing of the revelation that Lindy literally cannot walk without her bubble.
I don't know how to walk.
What do you mean?
I don't know how to walk without the arrows.
You don't know how to walk?
Without the arrow.
But I think what makes Lindy still an endearing character at this point in the story is that she becomes fully aware of her limitations and how bad this is. How she relies on her bubble for her travel, her bodily functions, everything, and it's not until this life or death situation crashes her into those limitations that she even realized how bad it's become, and she lashes out like a child.
You don't know how to walk without the arrows.
Oh, that's what I just said. Now shut up. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. We charge up at work and you stopped me from working. You took me away from my desk. This is your fault.
I know I'm dancing around the subject of the ending right now, so please understand that when I say Lindy Pepperbean is kind of a victim, that's a statement that comes with 1,000 caveats. But to an extent, Lindy Pepperbean is a victim of circumstance where her material conditions have given her a life-threatening case of physical and mental arrested development, and her becoming aware of that through brutal, invasive close-ups to an audience is kind of tragic. And that's the glue that's holding the first two acts of this episode together, and what makes her the inverse of the hyper-capable but still prone to emotional outbursts Sally Sparrow in Blink. And what is the threat that shakes Lindy to some sort of reality? Well, it's the man-trap slugs, one of the first alien creatures that fans spotted filming on location in early 2023, and I'm glad that we did actually see them on location because it just makes you appreciate the work the production team did. There's obviously CGI CGI enhancements and additional animations done on top, but these almost classic series looking slugs really have such an effective tactile presence. It takes 3 puppeteers inside the suit to operate these beasts, and I love the gnarly, slimy sound design surrounding them. And I'm not kidding when I say they look like they're from the classic series. They look like something that Barry Letts and Terrence Dicks would have conjured up to meet a deadline in the 1970s, and I say that as the biggest possible compliment. The man-traps look like they belong alongside the axons or the crinoids. But despite the man-traps being a standout visual element, they're not the biggest technical accomplishment. That would be the titular dot and the bubble it projects around the citizens of Finetime that follows them around and uses square windows as an interface to interact with everyone else. It's a pretty ingenious idea that builds upon modern VR headsets while still keeping the bubble allegory and locking this episode into the future.
The dot is their form of social media. It's a little hovering dot that projects all the friends in a literal bubble around you, so they are living in a bubble. It's like a metaphor.
I know writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards.
You even have the lip-syncing influencer Ricky September, who is followed by everyone, apparently, played by Tom Rhys-Harris. He's the first person that Lindy has an actual in-real-life interaction with in this story, as everyone else, including the Doctor and Ruby, are forced to use the bubble. And it turns out he's not just some vapid heartthrob, but he's well read and walks around without the bubble. He's also very thoughtful about Lindy's personal boundaries. We stan asking for consent around these parts. Under instructions from the Doctor, Ricky and Lindy start making their way underground to try and escape Finetime. If Lindy is the stand-in for a pseudo Doctor Who companion, then I don't think it's a stretch to view Ricky as a stand-in for the Doctor. From offering his hand as he and a young woman run away from monsters, his propensity for tech and exposition, and most importantly of all, his ability to make ambiguous moral judgments.
Link's busy, but they're coming. They're on their way. Just might take a little while.
However, as good a character beat as this is for Ricky, this becomes a pretty big issue in the broader strokes of the episode, but more on that later. So Ricky has to input 100 numbers into this panel to open a locked door, while the Doctor tries to figure out why the man-traps haven't killed them yet, despite ample opportunity to do so. And then, through sheer luck and contrivance, the Doctor stumbles across the answer. The man-traps are alphabetically inclined.
It's right in front of me. Those things are eating people in alphabetical order right across the city.
My instant reaction to this was, this twist is just like the Doctor's daughter. For those of you who don't remember, the Series 4 story from 2008 centered around a war between humans and Hath, which had lasted for generations. However, it was revealed at the end that war broke out just 7 days prior, and that they're going through generations so quickly that, well, war broke out 7 days ago, you see. And this changes things because, well, at least it gave Donna something to do. If you don't understand the connection, this twist in Dot and Bubble seems to exist just so there's a twist, and some in-universe explanation as to why Lindy and Ricky weren't killed earlier. This just does not hold up under scrutiny. TLDR, the Dot that's powering this society has apparently become sentient and hates humanity, so it created the man-traps somehow, and is killing off the population of Finetime, but alphabetically? Why not just kill them off as soon as possible in a logistically effective order instead of an arbitrary admin one? The Dot controls people's movements and paths to the extent that people like Lindy literally cannot walk without the arrows the Dot provides her with. So just walk all the citizens into the man-traps then. Why go through such an arbitrary method when total extermination is the objective here? It's so inefficient because we also learn that the Dot's betrayal and plan has been in motion for some time.
Stewie Bloom, when was the last time you saw him? Brewster Jacket? Joseph and Lucy, and I've not seen Kirsty Bookkeeper since last week.
So people have been disappearing for a week, and the Dot has only managed to make it halfway through the alphabet? God, those slugs are slow. The alphabet twist is treated like a hiding in plain sight type of deal, but it's just a shallow swerve to throw an extra conflict into the third act and to justify Lindy's survival despite her outright walking into one of the slugs at one point. Don't get me wrong, the man traps are cool, but why would a highly sophisticated and advanced artificial intelligence design, create, and then distribute these huge, incredibly slow and inefficient creatures rather than just, I don't know, launching themselves at their human owners? Wait, they can just do that? Then why not open with that? Come on! Oh, and don't even get me started on Lindy telling the highly intelligent Dot that has access to everyone's information, history, and even their biology to the extent where it knows their urine content.
I'm sorry, but your need to urinate has skyrocketed.
But the Dot apparently needed Lindy to tell it that Ricky's last name used to be Coombs, so it has to kill Ricky first instead of her. Yes, it's a massive emotional pivot, which is the first big mask-off moment for our leading character going into the final scene, and the actors play it so well. But why does the Dot not know this already? And more to the point, why does the Dot even care? Just kill Lindy as she's struggling to open the door, then kill Ricky a few seconds later. Oh wait, then there'd be no plot. So in order to work around this, Russell T Davies just pulled out massive episode-breaking contrivances. But like I said, I really like how the actors play this twist, especially Tom Rhys-Harris's performance. His death comes so soon after the betrayal, which kind of forces him to underplay it, but it makes the Dot's brutal swiftness through his skull even more affecting. It's a shame because he was nice and heroic and... Wait a second, if people have been going missing for at least a week and Ricky does go out to try and help people, then why has he only just now made a break for the exit? It's him going to the computer terminal and learning about the destruction of his homeworld the first time he's seen this information.
Oh, my gasp. Child.
I also feel the twist of the Dot creating the slugs in order to kill humanity because it's sick of them feels like it's at odds with the social media subtext of the episode, where social media and its algorithms force people into radicalized and often hateful bubbles for clicks and engagement. Why would it kill them for doing what it's encouraged them to do? Unless we go contrary to, say for example, the ending of Kablam and acknowledge that systems are a problem, but that people deliberately designed these systems, so who designed the Dot? I don't know, I feel like a Target novelization of this episode would be able to flesh this element out, because the allegory is becoming confused at this late point in the story, because the episode doesn't even have 10 minutes of runtime remaining, and it's still dropping twists and revelations, and those 10 minutes, that includes the ending confrontation and the ending credits, so there's no time for elaboration. Also, Ricky learns that the man-traps have managed to kill everyone on the homeworld, so were they just annoying on social media as well? It feels too vague, and the world building, the key underrated element where Black Mirror excels and is key to its success, feels really half-assed here. Now, I don't want to say the production logistics of this were half-assed. It was obviously a lot of work to cast, clothe, film, and incorporate all of the supporting characters in Lindy's bubble. I'm talking about the broad strokes of how widespread this Dot and Bubble tech is, and how the homeworld operates separately from Findtime. Obviously, class exists on the homeworld because the rich kids go off-world to party, so does the Dot hate the poor kids as well? And if so, for what reasons? Can poor kids on the homeworld even afford a Dot? If not, why did they deserve to die? I don't just want to brush over the idea of weak world building in Dot and Bubble. It works in this episode up to a point. Obviously the audience are following everything from Lindy's perspective and her bubble, and for most of the episode that limited perspective works, and you can look past the rather simplistic, one-note and, to be honest, pretty boring supporting cast. However, when the story wants to go into world-ending territory and wants to say something broadly about the society of Findtime and the people complicit in the system, I think its supporting characters need to be way more interesting and memorable. Black Mirror is well known for its shocking twists and unflinching adult themes, but I think what makes those vignettes so affecting is the incredibly economic storytelling and effective casting. You believe that these self-contained worlds have existed long before the audience tuned in, and that they'll exist long afterwards, and the characters appear fully formed within moments of being on screen. With Dot and Bubble, we don't get that here. partly by design, but unfortunately it results in a barrier forming between the audience and the people of Finetime because they just don't feel like real people, apart from Lindy. If Finetime is meant to be a super cool party utopia, then why do the streets look so plain and drab? Where do these kids party? Are there communal spaces? Because we don't see anything like that here. Like I said, this is an issue up to a point, but the main reason for this tangent is to emphasize that Black Mirror is much more than just technology bad. It's a masterclass of short-form economic storytelling. Or at least the first 3 seasons are. I've not had time to watch beyond that because I'm too busy watching Doctor Who. But it kind of feels, in a superficial sense, that Doctor Who just took the technology bad angle and stopped there. Maybe Dot and Bubble would have worked better as an ensemble piece? Maybe a group of 3 or 4 teenagers trying to find each other in Finetime as the world ends around them? Because Lindy is the sole audience avatar for an entire poorly defined society. It makes sequences like her lowering her bubble in the street and seeing exactly what needs to be conveyed to the audience, in this case the slugs being selective over who they kill, feel way too convenient, especially if the episode wants to emphasize the alphabetical element of the man-traps. But I'm writing Dot and Bubble fanfic at this point, so how about we talk about the episode's production and a few other observations before we get to that final scene. I don't just want to gloss over how great this episode looks and how it absolutely showcases director Dylan Holmes Williams' range with this production block. Going from a Welsh folk supernatural horror to a political drama to now a near-future technical showcase, yeah, having this type of range would make sense for the man hired to direct the show's next spin-off, The War Between the Land and Sea. It can't be understated how good the titular Dot and Bubble effects are, and how seamlessly they're incorporated into this world as a futuristic form of ARG meets social media platform. Stephen Moffat is absolutely right in that there's no such thing anymore as a low-budget Doctor Who episode, and I think Dot and Bubble is a testament to that, because I don't think there's a single shot in the first 2/3 of the episode that doesn't have visual effects involved. And while the outfit, makeup and hair choices are deliberately pretty garish and in your face for the citizens of Finetime, and your mileage may vary, I do love the set dressing and the colour schemes, particularly Lindy's pastel colour designed wardrobe. I love how fans were talking about wanting to cosplay her before the episode came out and hastily retracting every nice word they ever said about her, which, in its own funny way, is a testament to how good a job the production team did with this character's look. Oh, and I love Ruby's jumper in this episode. This might actually be my favourite Ruby Sunday look of the season, though a massive yuck to the Doctor's jumper without the coat. Also, it's funny how both of them get a crush on Ricky September. I love watching their expressions when they're talking to him through the bubble. Anyway, let's get to that ending. So Lindy gets Ricky killed by the Dot to save herself, and she eventually finds her way to an underground port where a few other Finetime survivors are gathered to sail into the outside world. There, Lindy reluctantly says thank you to the Doctor and Ruby, but her and the other survivors turn down the Doctor's offer to take them somewhere safe because apparently leaving on that boat will lead to certain death. It's here we learn that Lindy and the rest of Finetime's dislike of the Doctor goes beyond their shallow and conceited nature, but it's also racially motivated.
Because you, sir, are not one of us. I mean, screen-to-screen contact is just about acceptable, but in person...
Pym, can I talk to you for a second? Look, Pym, I know it's our job to help this guy and everything, but I think this guy's a lost cause. He's obviously made up his mind. Why don't we just cut our losses and get out of here?
While viewers did pick up on this subtext pretty much immediately on broadcast, I think it's also worth mentioning that this is the intended reading of the episode from Russell T Davies. Obviously, he talks about race in interviews, but it's also in the actual script. The script reads, "We couldn't travel with you. Why not? Because you, sir, are not one of us." The silence. Lindy Pepperbean, who's white, stands there with Hoochie Pie, who's white, and Brewster Cavendish, white, just like everyone in Finetime, Ricky September and Cooper Mercy, Valerie Nook, Blake Very Blue, Alan K. Sullivan, the Rotterdam Twins, Little Susie Pentecost, Gothic Paul, Harry Tendency, Beautiful Woman and Handsome Man and Weatherman Will, every single person white. This is the first time race is explicitly mentioned in the script, by the way. This is meant to take audiences somewhat by surprise. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't connect the dots at first, not consciously, when it came to the lack of non-white people in Fine Time, and I probably should have done. But I think that subversion as to what this episode is about is the most interesting part of this revelation. You see, while watching the first 2 acts at first, I thought that the subtext was still based around race or marginalisation. You've got this society where young, predominantly white people are on social media all the time, isolated in their literal and figurative bubbles, but then Lindy has the Doctor, a black man played by a queer actor, trying to communicate with her about the dangers of the outside world, these existential threats that are coming to get her as well, regardless of her race or class.
There are creatures out there in the real world, there are monsters, and they are coming to get you.
Through this lens, the man-traps could be an allegory for, gosh, take your pick, climate change, fascism, austerity, transphobia, or bigotry more broadly. Then you've got Ruby, who superficially fits in and is able to infiltrate Lindy's bubble where the Doctor can't, but Ruby comes from a mixed-race family, is working class, and could be perceived as a good ally to marginalised groups. You have people from marginalised groups and their allies trying to raise the alarm to privileged groups on social media to threats that do not discriminate. That's what I thought Dot and Bubble was going for, at first. You could even take this initial reading further with Gothic Paul, played by trans actor Pete McHale, being the only friend of Lindy who is trying to raise the alarm for all the people going missing, but we'll get back to Gothic Paul later. But then Dot and Bubble plays its hand subtly throughout the episode. There are some major red flags which are easy to miss on a first viewing, but really stick out on repeat viewings.
Didn't I block you? I thought that you just looked the same.
Unmuted.
I was so right to hate you.
Lindy has the words kindness all day long on the wall of her home, which is deeply sinister when her bigotry is unveiled, and oh my god, that hit me like a freight train when I go on social media and see a Doctor Who stan account preaching kindness and mental health care only to find out they've sent me death threats. And then once we get to that ending scene, the actors and the dialogue just makes my skin crawl, like how they call the Doctor's TARDIS voodoo, with clear racist connotations. Lindy is jealous of her mother's death in the sky.
Well, lucky mummy.
That's what I said.
That's so lucky.
They talk about their God-given duty without irony, their aim to tame nature like the pioneers of their ancestors. It's these last examples that really reveal what Dot and Bubble has been all along. All this time, we assumed we were watching an apocalypse story, where the Doctor and friends try and save humanity from the end of the world, but in these final moments we learn that no, the apocalypse has already happened. The world has already died. Fine Time is the post-apocalypse. The Doctor's too late. And I think that's one part of why the Doctor pleads his case so much, raging against the dying of the light, partially in denial that they've already chosen death because of their own bigotry, but also because he's a millennia-old time traveller who is above everyone here, trying to save a simple animal from danger, even though it's trying to bite him. Also, and I think this should go without saying, this is my subjective opinion and reading on this scene. I've seen opinions from across the spectrum, from non-white fans who hated this scene and the Doctor's reaction, to non-white fans who loved this scene. But with that being said, I think there are some elements that go beyond this scene that dilutes its impact somewhat. Firstly, there is the pretty awkward element of hypocrisy here, in that there is a white writer with a white director and white producers wanting to tell a story about how a non-white character responds to racism. Now, I don't think you have to be part of a marginalised group to tell these stories or to depict bigotry against other groups, but in interviews, Russell goes on and on about how the audiences likely won't pick up on the idea that there aren't any non-white people in Fine Time until the end and how bad that is, only for you to look at the above-the-line creative team of this season of Doctor Who, and every single person is white, except for a single director for a single episode. Mark Tonderai, the director of The Church on Ruby Road. Every other director, every writer, every producer, every head of department, all white. I think Russell might have been so preoccupied with wanting to showcase this unconscious bias within his audience that the idea of looking inward, or better yet, looking behind him at the team he and the other producers have assembled at Bad Wolf, just didn't happen. Secondly, and I got some pushback for this take online, but I think it's an element that once again shows the lackluster world building of Fine Time, and that's Gothic Paul. So Paul is played by a trans actor, Pete McHale, the first trans man to be cast in Doctor Who. Now, we can't know for sure if Pete is playing a trans character or not, but if Gothic Paul is trans, then what kind of strange hierarchical world accepts trans people in Fine Time, but not non-white people? Because these bigotries are inextricably linked. You only have to see J.K. Rowling and the rest of the conservative movement's reaction when a non-white woman, cis or otherwise, has anything approaching moderate success in sports to understand that you can't have one without the other. I am not saying that LGBTQ plus people can't be racist, obviously not. I'm talking about the broader, systemic oppression that permits both of these bigotries, not individual, personal examples of bigotry. But once again, this comes down to whether or not Gothic Paul is trans or not, which we can't confirm, and as has been pointed out, Paul has a pretty low follower count compared to other Bubble users in Fine Time. But even if we could confirm that, I don't know, doesn't it feel a bit strange to have our first trans male actor in Doctor Who, and then we learn they were playing a stone cold racist? And lastly, and I understand this is me jumping ahead somewhat, but the next episode to broadcast after Dot and Bubble is Rogue, a flagrant homage to Netflix's Bridgerton, where one of its main distinguishing features is colourblind casting for Regency-era aristocrats that Doctor Who adopts. Now, I have no issue with colourblind casting of this nature in Bridgerton, or in Doctor Who, or most media generally. I actually think that even the writers of Doctor Who historicals accidentally underappreciate how diverse history already is. But to have Rogue, an episode with historically inaccurate multiracial aristocrats and interracial relationships in the early 19th century, follow an episode that's meant to draw attention to audiences' bias of not noticing the exclusively white population of Fine Time, does feel a bit like the series trying to have its cake and eating it too, and leaving both of these explicit casting choice decisions muddling the overall message of both. That having been said, this scene on its own, in a bubble, is pretty incredible TV. Yes, Ncuti is incredible, magnificently trying to rise above it all and be the better person. No, these people do not deserve the Doctor's help, but he's the Doctor, and he's going to offer it to them. His disbelieving laugh, followed by the cry of rage. God, I feel that whiplash in my bones. It's an incredible few seconds of acting, made even more impressive when you learn that this was his first day of filming for his season. He obviously did some filming for the giggle, but this scene on the barge in freezing winter Wales was Ncuti first scene for season 1. And it's one hell of a baptism of fire. But also, shout out to Millie Gibson here as well, wanting to help and support the Doctor but not knowing what to say. And she just stands back and lets him have his outburst. She's watching a best friend process something horrible, and nothing she can say can make it better, and my heart breaks for both of them. Millie doesn't upstage Ncuti, rightfully so, but she's still giving so much thought and consideration to her actions here, possibly informed by Ruby Sunday coming from a non-white foster family and may have her own experiences watching prejudice like this happen to those that she cares about. And in the middle here is Callie Cook, partly going with the crowd but mostly just unable to see humanity outside of the bubble society has thrust upon her, choosing racism and certain death, which, yeah, that's 2024, summed up nicely. Props to the Bad Wolf team as well for letting Callie read the full script before accepting the part so she could know exactly what she was signing up for, because I was genuinely worried after this episode was broadcast that she did so good a job that she might never be able to attend conventions because of fans taking parasocial relationships too far or failing to understand the difference between actors and characters. Thankfully, Callie has done recent interviews saying that she's had great experiences meeting Doctor Who fans, and that feels like it should be a low bar, but I've been in this fandom long enough to know that it's a bar that can't always be met. So with an episode that ends like that, it can be difficult to talk about Dot and Bubble as a whole, so as a complete 45-minute episode, does it work? Yes, mostly. Like I said, I love the episode's production. I think Callie Cook is a born star, the man-traps are horrific and adorable, and I will now worship our racist eating overlords with open arms. But I do think that the lackluster world building does limit its impact. It's clearly got a lot on its mind, and thankfully it does go beyond the phone's bad approach that Dot and Bubble so easily could have gone with, but I think limiting the episode's scope to just Lindy Pepperbean means that we're dealing with a lot of stockpiling contrivances and an awkwardly structured story. It has a killer ending, but there's a lot of broader issues with this era of Doctor Who that prevent it from landing as hard as it probably should, which leaves me thinking that maybe Russell T Davies should have either waited until another season to tell this story, or let someone else take the reins on it. Still, it's probably the most successful experiment of this season in trying to showcase the range and scope of Doctor Who as a full-blown format to tell interesting stories with meta twists where the show's lead characters barely appear. But its allusions to Black Mirror are a bit shallower than they should be. Dot and Bubble takes the tech dystopia and the traditionally downer endings of the series, but not the effective world building that makes them so impactful. But it does succeed mostly as a character piece, where you hate the lead character by the end of it. But anyway, join me next time as the Doctor and Ruby decide to promote a rival streaming service with a deliberate homage to Netflix's Bridgerton. A brand new duo of writers for the series give us romance, dancing, aliens, everything a Doctor Who episode should have in Rogue. I'll see you next time. Hey folks, thank you so much for watching my long-belated review of Doctor Who Dot and Bubble. I hope you folks enjoyed it. Leave any thoughts, any comments down in the comment section below. It helps to appease the almighty YouTube algorithm. While you're here, make sure that you're subscribed, like the video, do all of that good stuff. It really does help to support the channel. And another way you can support this channel is by becoming a patron or becoming a YouTube member. There are links to all of that in the description below, but basically you can help to support the channel financially, make sure that these videos continue to be produced. You can also get them early, get your name in the credits like these beautiful gits here, and also here's a shout out to these particular patrons: Adam Grattan, Ben Langdon, Chiba City Blues, Dan, Daniel Davis, DC63 Productions, and thank you to DC63 Productions for also sponsoring this video, once again helping to keep the channel running, Dean Jones, Dylan Whitaker, Air Hoovian, Flippant, High Lord Wolnir, Jack D. Evans, Joseph Adams, Lard Dragon Ezra, Leela, Maria Bergman, Marianne Mogensen, Michael Serrano, Miranda Logan, Palex, Quinny, R. Sprinkle, Raven Woods, Retrospective Raccoon, Reese Lloyd, RJL, Ross A.T. Stewart, Ryan Duncan, The Brit Sniper, The Scarlet Watcher, and Will. Thanks so much to all of my patrons, thanks so much to all of my members, thanks to you for watching, and I'll see you all next time. I promise, the review for Rogue will not be so long a wait. I promise. I promise. Cross my hearts.